Good afternoon. Let me tell you about Queen Mantatisi. Queen Mantatisi of the Batlokwa tribe of Southern Africa reigned during the early 1800s. History tells us that Queen Mantatisi had to step into the shoes of her son, Sekonyela, who was meant to take over as the chief of the Batlokwa when his father, Mukojo, died. Mukojo died at the age of 27, and Sekonyela was therefore too young to take up the role of chief of the Batlokwa. And her mother, Queen Mantatisi, had to stand in his place as regent on his behalf. Queen Mantatisi was known to be a strong, brave, and capable leader. During the time of the Difaqane Wars, which was a time of great migration across the Southern African region, Queen Mantatisi had to use her bravery, her intellect, and her prowess, and in fact her staunch character, to protect the Batlokwa people and keep her people together. This was during a time of very many raids by King Shaka of the Zulu nation, who at the time was seen as the most powerful military force. Despite Queen Mantatisi's prowess and the acknowledgement thereof, she still faced resistance. Some of her subjects resented the very idea of being led by a woman because they believed that women were there to give birth to children and to take care of families, and had no business leading any nation or any tribe. In spite of this, Queen Mantatisi held on strong and led her nation successfully. During her reign, she ruled over more than 40,000 people and was able to lead them into very many victories against King Shaka. She played the role of chief, she played the role of adjudicator, she built her military capability and her political authority across parts of Southern Africa. It is said all the way between the Free State up to Botswana. So was she such an intelligent woman that it is said that one time when her warriors had gone away from their camp and she was left mainly with the Batlokwa women, King Mpangazita of the Hlubi tribe took advantage of that and tried to attack their camp. Queen Mantatisi got all the women of the village together in front of the camp. There were a few men left in the village, and he asked the few men that were left in the village to stand in front of the women. The men took the hose and the mats that the women had been carrying and started bandaging them around. It is said that from a distance, Chief Mpangazita got the impression that there was a great deal of warriors at camp, which of course messed up with his plans and stopped them in their tracks, and they had to retreat. It is said that with time, as her followers started respecting her, they started referring to themselves as the Mantatisis. In those days, a great and powerful chief was given that attribute as a sign of respect for what they had been able to achieve. It is also said that many came up with the story that she was so fearful or so feared rather, that they thought she had an eye on her forehead. She was so powerful that she fed her tribe off her own breast milk. And as a result of these stories, many were very afraid to attack her. It is the story of Mantatisi, Queen Mantatisi, who it is said was of a very small stature, but very brave, very strong, very intelligent, loved her people, compassionate, and was a pathfinder. It is the story of this great queen who reigned in the 1800s, that gave us the courage to say that we too want to start something that is unheard of, that is unpopular, that is unexpected, and that people will struggle to understand. But that is important for where we are as a people, as a nation, as a continent. We asked ourselves the question, what would the world look like if we saw it through the lens of Queen Mantatisi? Indeed, what would the world look like today if we saw the world through the lens of gender? What does that mean? Would the world today be at war with Russia and Ukraine if those countries were led by women? Would the world have gone to World War I, World War II, very many decades ago, if women were central to some of the decisions that were being made at the time? Would Queen Mantatisi have taken the decision that King Shaka took of scattering Southern Africans across the region, creating havoc, creating fear that we still live with until today, and scattering us all over the continent and leaving us homeless? Would she, having the power that King Shaka had at the time, taken that decision? We may never know. But it is the importance of this story and how it demonstrates the power of inclusivity and diversity in leadership that also led us to believe that we need to be very intentional about how we include the other gender, the forgotten half of the world population, the very powerful gender, into our everyday decision-making. I'm an investor. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis. And when we started our business in 2014, we understood that we had to be very intentional and unapologetic about putting women and gender broadly at the center of our investment strategy. So you ask me, what do I mean by looking at the world through a gender lens? We must first start by defining what gender is. Of course, we often think about it as simply men and women. But in the society we live in, gender is beyond how we were biologically brought about. It is about how we believe in it culturally and socially, how we see the differences and how we relate to them, and what we embrace as that which describes who we are. That's what gender is. Having understood what that gender is, we then also understood the importance of inclusivity and diversity in the investment work that we do. Because it has been demonstrated that when you've got diverse people within your work environment and within your investments, you actually are able to drive superior returns when you are an investor. What does this gender lens outlook to investing look like? We were asked this question very many times when we were going about trying to raise capital both locally and internationally. And we had to codify in a language that investors can relate to what that means. Gender lens investing refers to looking at the inclusion and diversity of all our genders when you look at the ownership of a company. It talks about looking at the diversity and inclusion of all genders when you look at managers, executives, and employees of companies that we invest in. It talks about looking at, again, the diversity and inclusivity of genders in our company supply chains across the board. Who are we buying goods and services from? It talks about looking at, through our distribution channels as companies that produce goods and services, who do we use to distribute what it is that we are producing to the end user? And perhaps more importantly, more so today, we also look at how do the products and services that the companies that we invest in actually impact on the lives of the genders that we are talking about, on the lives of women, on the lives of children, on the lives of the diverse customer base that we talk about. And we have determined and developed the first of its kind gender lens investment toolkit that we use in every stage of our investment decision-making process. Now, those who are investors listening to this will say, but how does that look? I will use a very practical example of a business that we invested in 2015 called Sweep South. Sweep South is a very well-known technology platform in South Africa, and I think increasingly so across the continent. In 2015, we were approached by this young team of techies who said, we think that there's an opportunity for us to aggregate domestic workers in this country. We've come up with a technology solution. It was a diverse team of founders. It was not a male or female, it was a diverse team of founders, both male and female. It was also, even then at the time, but even increasingly so 7 or 8 years later, made up of a diverse team of employees. And when you look at them today, and you look at their service providers, who are the domestic workers, they also are in the majority women. And importantly, the ultimate users of their product are women professionals. Now, the importance of what they did is that it was not just about the inclusion of gender, but it was a demonstration that a company that had a woman at its helm understood the challenges that our domestic workers face, the underpayment, the abuse, the lack of security around, will I be able to get a job this week? Will I be then able to earn an income and feed my children? And we all know that domestic workers are the most appreciated people in our society. And it is through this gender team, this gender diverse team, that they were able to understand, led by an African woman at the center of it, the challenges that were faced in the main by African women, and came up with a very practical solution to the challenges that they face. Today, Sweep South has supported more than 25,000 jobs for domestic workers, has standardized the rate of pay so they know how much they can earn, has also has democratized their ability to say, today I want to work, tomorrow I don't want to work, and if I work today, I'm going to work for so many hours, and they can determine ahead of time how much income they can generate for themselves. Importantly, they have been very, very intentional about the development of the domestic workers that are on their platform. Some of the women who are service providers to Sweep South have been able to progress their studies to get their degrees and actually move on to better quality jobs. And those are the things that we look for when we talk about gender lens investing opportunities that also ensure that there's superior returns commercially. And I will share with you that when we first invested in Sweep South in 2014, and we did our first exit from them, when we did our first exit, we exited at 12 times the money that we invested. Now that is superior return. And it is these examples that we use to say that when you are inclusive in your fullness, in the whole value chain, as an investor, you are actually not sacrificing commercial return, but you are actually enhancing your commercial return. In my world of private equity and venture capital investing, I can share with you that when we walked through the doors of this sector in 2008, when we started, we were the only women-owned private equity firm in South Africa at the time, and in fact, I dare to say on the African continent. We were uninvited, we were unexpected, and we were expected to fail spectacularly, for that matter. We walked into an industry that was primarily male, and perhaps more so, pale. It was a male and a pale industry. It was an all-white boys club. Private equity and venture capital investing, the typical face you come across is that of males in general and pale ones in particular. and they invariably tend to also then invest in those who look like them, who speak like them, and who come from their backgrounds. It is into this world that we walked into with an acute understanding of the need to change the status quo, with an acute understanding of the need to be intentional in bridging the gap between the owners of capital and the seekers of capital. It was because we were operating in a country and an economy that has some of the highest levels of inequality. We are faced with real socioeconomic challenges that require intentionality about how you drive capital towards where it is needed the most. Women entrepreneurs on the African continent make up about 40% of SMEs, and yet less than 2% of capital goes towards investing in these businesses. We believe that with this intentionality, and we have proven it, you can find worthwhile businesses to invest in that result in real economic development of our countries and of our continent. We believe that you can invest in businesses that can create real, meaningful, and lasting impact in the lives of women, in the lives of children, in the lives of African. It was African women who figured this out, not any men. It was African women who developed a gender-lens investing toolkit when the world could not fathom the idea of investing in women and what it looks like. And whilst we started in South Africa, nobody believing that we would succeed in investing in this space, over time, as we built a very strong track record, we started gaining recognition, not just locally, but globally. Once we started talking about the case studies of success of investing in gender diverse teams, the world stood still and said, let us listen to them a little bit more. The world started giving some bit more of respect towards African women than they did before. The world started changing their views of us as seekers of grant funding and changing their view to us becoming solutions finders for the challenges that we face as a continent. It is through this track record that we had built over time that we joined forces with a like-minded private equity firm in Lagos, Nigeria, that is also women-owned and led. And we were able to raise the largest private equity fund that is focused on investing in SMEs led and owned by women on the African continent. It took 2 African women to do that, whilst our male counterparts who have been at the center of decision-making, both economic decision-making as well as political decision-making, seem to not have seen this very problem that was so evident to us as African women. It took 2 African women to find a solution to a very obvious problem, at least obvious to us as African women, and perhaps not so to our male counterparts. And perhaps it is the story of Mantatisi who started off being seen as a one-eyed monster, and over time being respected and people wanting to be associated with her, that has led us to where we are today, that we might have started off as a one-eyed monster who were uninvited, unexpected, and sure to fail. And over time, with hard work and dedication, and that resoluteness of Queen Mantatisi, that we have been able to make the whole world wake up to the reality of the power of the African women. Now let me introduce you to the African women. For time immemorial, the African woman has taken up the fight to emancipate herself and the world. The African woman has carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, and we have carried the weight of our men on our shoulders. We have given life. We give birth. We have educated our societies about us. We have educated the world about us. We are powerful. And it is this power that the world fears. And you see their fear in their oppression of us. You see their fear in their disdain for us. And yet, time and again, everything that we have done has been for the betterment of humanity. Africa will not rise until the African woman rises. The African woman understands the challenges of this continent. Not only do we understand the challenges of this continent, we are the ones who own the solutions to the challenges that we face. We are indeed the ones we have been waiting for.